Welcome to Fear Less, Do More, the podcast where we dive into the minds of some extraordinary and fearless businesses and people who are challenging the status quo and who are helping to change the world of business around us. I'm your host, Gill Hunter. I'm the managing partner at Square One Law. On each episode, I'll be chatting to innovators, change makers and trailblazers, where we explore the unique journeys of our guests. We'll delve into the fears they've faced, the setbacks they've overcome, the lessons they've learned along the way. We'll uncover the secrets behind their resilience, and we'll find out what motivates them to keep going, even in the face of adversity. We'll also have a few laughs along the way too. My guests are all leaders who relentlessly pursue their passions, not only to create a better tomorrow, but who inspire us to push our own boundaries, those who fear less and do more. Hi and welcome to our podcast today. Today I'm talking with Paul Lewney, who is the Managing Director of Kavli. Paul, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Kavli, people will think, I don't know who that is, but actually they probably do.
They probably know more about our brands than our holding company, as it were, which is much the same as it was when I actually joined. When I got a call over 20 years now to say, would you be interested in joining Kavli? I went, and who are they? So I think it's something that is well known in our Scandinavian countries, Norway and Sweden in particular, where our founder's name, which is where Kavli comes from, is the predominant side of things. In the UK, it's about Primula, I guess, really is a brand name that people know, Primula Cheese, and Castle McClellan, which is based in southwest Scotland, and that produces a number of other dairy-based products, such as cheese bakes and the like.
They're a family favourite in my house.
Excellent,
cheese
good to hear it.
Especially at Christmas. It's always an excuse to get a few cheese bakes in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how does a Norwegian cheesemaker end up in Gateshead?
Wow. Well, if you go back to the history, I guess the business itself was started 100 and so years ago now. It came to the UK in 1924. And eventually on to Team Valley in 1960. And basically the owner, the founder, Olav Kavli, he was, as those days called, a travelling salesman. So it was his company, but he basically picked up products, took them into Europe and started to export them. The UK became a strong market for them. So that's where they really decided to focus. Set up a site just north of Newcastle originally, as I say, then moved on to Team Valley in just about 1960.
I mean, Primula is quite an iconic brand. Yeah. I mean, I have memories of dinner parties for my parents when I was younger, which were, celery with Primula Cheese squirted down the middle, which was one of my favourites. I used to always try and pinch a few of those. But there's Primula has changed quite a lot. It's an innovative business. It's not one that sort of stayed in the 60s.
Very much so, and I think that's been really part of the challenge. I think if you think about everybody knew Primula, or everybody knew their mum and dad had Primula, or even their grandparents had Primula. And I guess it's how we translate that and evolve it to continue. So it's about packaging format. So we've changed from what was originally an aluminium format into now an easier squeeze plastic format. Ironically, again, we're just looking at that now in terms of sustainability. Is plastic the best way forward, or moving back to aluminium? So that's part of our consumer focus groups at the moment for the future. And then you've got the flavours, which you've got to develop as well. So we've gone from what you probably remember as things like cheese and pineapple.
Yeah.
We've still got things like cheese and chive and cheese and ham. But we've now brought in more relevant and contemporary flavours like sriracha and jalapeno and those sort of things. So it's keeping the flavour profile interesting for new consumers to come into. So you can continue to bring new consumers to the brand, I guess, over time. And
one of the things that I think people probably don't appreciate is how the business is structured, because it's not actually a business that's set up for profit in the traditional sense.
No, not at all. We have to generate profits. That's the most important thing. So we're not a not-for-profit. We have to generate profit. So we're a commercial entity in that sense. But all the profits that we generate after reinvestment are given to support good causes. So I think in the last, in overall terms within the group, we've given away over £100 million in the last 10 years.
Wow.
And locally, we in the northeast we've given away nearly 10 million into the UK. So it's a fantastic story in many ways in terms of the way the owner set it up originally as a trust. He didn't have any sons and heirs to pass it on to, so he set it up into a trust, and that's continued. And originally the trust board and the holding board, and they still do, act separately, so they're independent. But we're now starting to work much closer. So it's how we can almost leverage that good news in terms of giving our money away without compromising ourselves as well. And that's always a fine balance, I guess, really. So we do have many ways of communicating with consumers and the wider public. And we have each year our own people within the workplace can also choose who we should give money to.
I was going to ask about that. How you decide which causes to support?
So we have three key strands. It has to be humanitarian, cultural, or into research, and that's really derived from the trust itself. That's the constitution, if you like, of the trust, and we have to then balance that off locally and say, right, okay, we've got £200,000-300,000 of money that's come back from the trust for us to give away locally, and our workforce, our colleagues. There's a small committee for Kavli in the community, Kit C, as we call it, and they have the opportunity then to receive nominations from any charity, and typically it tends to be close to our sites, to be fair, and we encourage that because I think you can make a real difference with a smaller charity. There's nothing wrong with the big charities. It's great, and we support some of those big charities looking at things like ME, or there's a big study going on at the moment which we're supporting in terms of children's mental health. From a group perspective. But I think locally, when we're in Gateshead, we can make a real difference. So things like Washington Riding School, where we built new stables for them, which they could then rent out for livery, which then generates an income. So it's looking at those sustainable options. We've done some other work recently in some of the more challenging areas, shall we say, around Newcastle, where we're looking at how we can build maybe a kitchen into a local centre, which then creates meals for the local community at a lower price, rather than having to go to a shop and buy them. So it's those sort of things which you can work on with real charities locally and make a real difference.
And having that sort of overarching ethos around using the business for good, how does that impact on recruitment, for example?
I think it's very positive. I think it's getting that balance of letting people understand that you can come into this business and we have a long-term vision, a long-term plan. So, having worked previously for large national companies or international companies, you're always only as good as your last quarter, if you like. So when you're reporting your numbers, decisions are taken in a much shorter time frame. Whereas I think with Kavli, we allow ourselves, and we've seen that probably in the last 12, 18 months with the challenges in the marketplace generally, we allow ourselves a bit more time to understand the dynamics, what we need to do, make those changes, and then move forward again. So putting that across to somebody when you're bringing somebody in, getting that cultural fit with the individual is quite critical. I think we've probably learned sometimes that not everybody fits this style, which is fine. In the same way as people who work for us maybe wouldn't stay another style of business. So it's about getting that right fit. But it certainly has a positive when we go to the marketplace to talk to people about this is why our reason for being is to create value for good causes. Let's do that, and let's live it really as a whole.
It's a really strong message.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is.
And you mentioned there some of the sort of the challenges that you face. What's going on in the world of cheese at the moment?
Yeah, well, I guess 2022 was a year for many people, not just Kavli, in terms of food manufacturers, I think, because that's the sphere in which we operate. So raw ingredients and packaging. I mean, if you take cheese, for example, so we buy blocks of cheese. Primula Cheese comes from basically taking real blocks of cheese and adding heat. We melt them down to make it spreadable. And then we add real ingredients in terms of the flavours. So it's real ham that goes in there, and it's real chives or prawns, as it were. So all those costs went through the roof basically last year. Cheese went up by about 130%.
Wow.
So you can't absorb that amount of cost and just continue. So we had to go to the market, and when we took some price increases in the marketplace, as probably everybody had to. And again, that's another challenge, dealing with our customers, the supermarkets predominantly. But they were supportive. I mean, the timings, obviously, there's always a delay, and they have every right to challenge and discuss what's made up those extra costs. But it's great to be able to get those increases through. Hopefully we remain competitive in the marketplace, and the market stabilises at a new position, I guess, really, with some of the other players in the market. Then on top of that, you've got things like energy as well, which I think everybody obviously suffered from. And I think the biggest one over the last, as you came out of pandemic, was really people. And you mentioned people and recruiting, but I think it was about people were very stable for a 2-year period while the pandemic was around. You know, it was difficult, or won't be more difficult to move, or people didn't want to move. And then as the pandemic finished, obviously it was all the stops came off, and everybody thought, oh, let's have a think about what we do. So we did well, I think, because we retained, you know, obviously a very strong core of people with because of what we are and what we do. But when you go into the market for skilled people, especially people like engineers and those sort of special skills that you need in food manufacturing, I think it was quite challenging.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's a common thing when I talk to people. Skills is quite often up there, the top, particularly getting enough people, the right people.
Exactly.
And then once you've got them, retaining them, because competition's fierce for talent and people are poached.
And I think in the Northeast, I think people tend to either have been here, go away and then want to come back.
Yeah.
Or they come here and they like the area, maybe it's university, and they find a job and then they settle here. So I think it's hard to have somebody who's got no knowledge of the Northeast to come to the Northeast.
Yeah.
If you've got a link, I think it's fine. I mean, I'm obviously, you can probably tell from my accent, really, I'm not from the Northeast originally, although I've been up here for 25 years now nearly. And kids were born up here and everything. But I think for bringing in people into the Northeast, it is still a challenge, I think.
Hopefully that will change as the Northeast's profile
is
raised. I mean, there've been a number of television programmes and things recently which have all been centred on the Northeast, which I think are putting us more on the map.
Absolutely.
And not just as a party city.
No.
As a place where you can have a viable business and...
Well, it is. And the beautiful countryside. I think Robson Green, for instance, has done a wonderful piece about Northumberland, hasn't he? So it's great to have people like that who are sort of advocates, really, for the area. And although they've got careers that are probably all around the world, they still come back to the Northeast and have a positivity around it. So it's great. So
what led you to the Northeast then?
Basically, it was a job. So previously we were in York. Again, wonderful place. I loved York as a city. But the opportunity for this one, when it came up in 2000, really, it wasn't commutable, clearly. So even though I joined the company as sales director, in 2000, and then I've taken on various roles in terms of supply chain and a broader commercial director role, and then deputy MD and then MD from 2008. So it's been a great sort of. I've really enjoyed the career I've had up here and the life we've enjoyed up here. But I guess would I have chosen to come to the Northeast if I hadn't been asked, if you like, by Kavli?
Yeah.
It probably wouldn't have been on my list. But having come up here, it's been great for us and the family. So.
And were you in food manufacturing beforehand?
Yeah, so previously I'd worked for Danone, yogurts, but they also owned things like Evian and HP and those sort of things at the time, Jacobs. And then I'd worked prior to that for a company called Schwann's, which produced frozen pizzas. And then before that, I was in retail. So I was with Sainsbury's. So that's where I started my career. So
you poacher turned gamekeeper now.
Yeah, pretty much so, yes. And you never forget those days. I always remember the days in Sainsbury's when it was a predominantly store-based role. And you used to have, in those days, you used to still have representatives from companies coming in and taking orders in the stores on a weekly basis, and then the order would be delivered. So life moved on a long way very quickly, with central distribution and those sort of things. So it's...
And how's technology changes? How has that impacted on the business? Because you must have seen a lot of sort of technical change around manufacturing.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the biggest change to us was putting in a full ERP system about 2004. So it's quite a long time ago now when it went in. So that integrates everything together, really, in effect, in terms of supply chain, right through to manufacturing, finance, everything. So I think once that's in, and it's always a big change. It's like people, I think I've mentioned things like SAP before, SAP. Ours is a different one, but it's that similar sort of style of model. And I think the pain barrier never goes away because you're always constantly evolving it, and tweaking it. So it's how you can then integrate things into that. So at the moment, one of the big projects we've got is how we can focus on our operational efficiencies within the business, how we can improve those, improve yield, etc. So it's an ongoing thing, but it becomes more highlighted, I guess, when costs rise and you realise you maybe aren't getting 100% yield. That cost becomes a bigger proportion of your overall cost. So it's that side of things in terms of manufacturing is constantly evolving, and we have our own internal mechanism called Kavli Best. So which is really around how you can achieve manufacturing excellence within the business. So I think we started off with a world-class aspiration. But to do that, obviously, you've got to look at other people and understand what world-class really is. And then once you've measured where you are against that, is then putting in place those steps to achieve continuous improvement year on year. Yeah.
So that must help with also with the sort of negotiations with the supermarkets, who are notoriously difficult to deal with. How much does the brand sell itself now?
I think every time you speak to a retailer or a customer generally, I guess, whether it's retail or hotels, restaurants, caterers, I think you have to start or almost in your own mind start from scratch. So you have to almost prove. I mean, buyers come and go. They're a bit like policemen. They seem to be getting younger all the time. So I guess what we have to do is almost part of an education, really. So part of that when we go and see a buyer will be to talk around the business, our background, our ethos, the way we do business, linked to the trust. And then from there, talking around why and what's the data behind why consumers buy our brand, And I think most of the decisions now, or a lot of decisions now from a retailer perspective, are based on data. So you can talk around your investments, and that's part of our plans really over the next 5 years or so, is to grow our target is to grow by 60% by 2028. That'll take us from a £24 million business to a £40 million business on spreads. And if we can do that, we have to support the customer to understand why they need to make the decision to list us. So we can have some great products. We can generate as many products you like with wonderful flavours. But if you can't get the retailer to put it on the shelf and then the consumer to take it off the shelf, it's all pretty pointless, really. So our above the line advertising is critical. So what message do we want our consumers to have? Why should they pick Primula when it's on the shelf? And then how do we get that message to our customers, the Tesco, Sainsbury's, etc. of the world, about why Primula is relevant for today? Because a lot of them will look at it and go, well, it's spreadable cheese. Why should I put it on? Why should I put you on rather than 2 or 3 of your other competitors? And that's really where our sort of integrated trade marketing campaigns support the brand and hopefully move it forward.
And you mentioned sustainability earlier. Is that a key part of the business now?
I think for every business it has to be, doesn't it, really? That's part of what the consumer is asking for, and we should really be asking ourselves, what are we doing? What is the right decision to take? And I think that's the way that we try to challenge ourselves. So every decision that we take, we're never going to be the most sustainable business in the world. Our technology and our infrastructure doesn't support that at the current time. However, we can do things better. And every change that you make and every decision that you take, I think, is where it's critical. So when we come to think about tubes, where do our tubes, our cheese and tubes go? Is it better in the long term for the consumer and for the world in an aluminium tube or a plastic tube? It would be logical to think that it would be aluminium. Recyclability is better. There isn't really currently a recyclable or recycled plastic you can use, which is food grade. Right. So we have to use fresh plastic, in effect, for our tubes. But it is recyclable. So once the consumer has it, it can go into other products. So as long as they put it into the right bin ultimately. The cheese tube itself can be recycled. And that was an important move for us. But again, each one of these steps you have to review each time to make sure that you're making the right decision as you look forward.
Okay. So in terms of yourself, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What drives you?
I guess I love the business. I guess it becomes ingrained in you as well. So I think getting up and I love dealing with the people. So when you go into the business, I love to be able to walk around the shop floor, talking to people across the whole business, just understanding what makes other people tick as well, and it's great to be able to do that. And that's really what kind of floats my boat. There's the business side of things. Obviously, you want to make sure that the business is successful, and that's still critical. But I guess I think we've got a great team of people. How we can continue to build that team of people, so it's investments in terms of training and developing people. I think as long as we can continue to do that makes me happy in many ways, and hopefully brings the success to the business.
And if you were going to give advice to yourself 20 years ago coming into the business in 5 words.
In 5 words?
In 5 words, what advice would you give yourself 20 years ago?
It's one of my colleagues uses a term, and that's eating the elephant with a spoon. I'm not sure whether that's 5 words or not, but
with spoon,
it's close enough.
Spoon, it's close, yeah.
And I think that's what you do when you first come in and you want to change the world. I think you think you can make all the differences, and I think it's about having a plan, understanding when you want to achieve certain things, rather than trying to hit everything head on straight away. Because if you're not careful, you either run out of energy or you can't deliver on the things that you want to do. So it's about breaking things up. I think in essence, focusing, ensure that you can delegate effectively. I think one of the other things that you tend to do when you come in is, we all feel we're Superman or Superwoman. And there are some great people who are probably, but ultimately I think it's the strength of the team is much bigger than the individual.
Yeah.
And that's really something that I think you learn over time, is that, yes, it's about having a great team around you. You can't do everything yourself. You don't have the knowledge to do everything yourself, but if you put a great strength of team around you with some great people, you can achieve so much more.
And what would you sort of consider to be the sort of proudest moment in your career?
Ooh, that's a difficult one, I guess. Really. There's so many things, but I think there's been various numbers of things where we've been able to support. It comes down to the business, really. Taking away having your kids and everything else, because we all, if you have the opportunity, that's lovely. But within the business perspective, I think personally, I was very fortuitous and I managed to meet the Queen and King Charles, as he is now, through the business. We had a site visit where they came to see us. So that was nice to be able to show off our business to our visitors, which was fantastic. But I think every year, and I stood up recently, we had a briefing inside the business. 3 times a year we stop the business for a couple of hours and we brief everybody to keep everybody up to speed where we are. And I was saying to people then, they should be proud of what we do because it really does make a difference in the community. And I think that's where I sit, I think, really, in many ways. Every year when we give money away and I meet the people who the money is going to, the good causes who we support, and you understand what they're doing with it and how much it makes a difference in the local community, you come away just feeling so warm and it's so proud about what you do. You really are making a difference in our local communities. And I think that's, I'm lucky as much as we do that every year. So I've got many moments of being proud, but yeah, you can't, I guess you can't replace those sort of things. They're memories that'll stay with you forever. Really
important question. Does the king eat Primula?
If I told you, I'd have to shoot you.
What's his favourite flavour? That's what I want to know. Is he a prawn man?
I think some things have to stay private, I'm afraid.
I bet he likes a cheese bake. That's the.
I can't deny that.
So one of the things that's really important to us in our business is that we have fun when we're at work, because everybody's at work for such a long period of time. It's got to be fun. What do you do for fun, both at work and at home?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand not everybody treats fun in the same way.
Yeah.
So twice a year, we actually again stop separately for the workforce, and we have a karaoke afternoon. So that doesn't work for everybody, but for those who like it, and it's probably 2/3 of the workforce who want to go away, we have drinks and we have a karaoke afternoon, and everybody just lets their hair down and we just all become one, if you like, and that's quite good fun. Can't say I'm the best singer in the world.
What's your go-to song?
Oh, well, I do like a bit of Pretty Woman, but it's not done very well, I'm afraid. So we do that. Personally, I still follow my historical football team, so I'm still an Everton fan. Although obviously my kids have been brought up as Newcastle fans. So a bit of sport puts a smile on my face. Or in the last couple of seasons, maybe not a smile on my face for me. But yeah, and then outside of that, I guess just I love. Up until recently, we had a small dog. Unfortunately, she was 15, so she passed away. But it's great to be able to just go out and walk down on the beach. There's some lovely beaches in the northeast where you can just almost lose yourself for a couple of hours, walk along, come back, get a cup of coffee, and it's a different world during that time. So a nice blend, really.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the beauty of working in the northeast, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got that ability to blend.
Yeah.
Very easily. You can you feel like you are going home away from work and you're in a different place.
It is very much so. I mean, I'm lucky. As I say, we live just slightly north of Newcastle, and we're probably 15 minutes or so from the beach. So it's a great opportunity when the weather allows to allow us to get out and about.
Well, I think that's a lovely note to end on. So thanks ever so much, Paul. Really enjoyed having a chat with you today.
And you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Fear Less, Do More. All of our guests come from a diverse range of backgrounds, but they all share a common drive to face their fears, take action, and create meaningful impact. If you've enjoyed this episode of our podcast, please follow us, Square One Law, on Instagram and LinkedIn, and share the content with your friends, family, and networks. Thank you, and see you again on our next episode.